OverDrive continues, powered by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We'll get to our best bets later this hour. Leafs Panthers tonight. Pierre, LeBrun coming up. Edmonton down in Jersey. Dustin, Nielson later in the hour. And the Oilers, the West. A lot going on in hockey tonight. A lot going on in baseball, too. I guess Doogie said Rafael Devers down in Boston. Now he's okay with being a DH. Where when Bregman came in, it was somewhat of a sticky.
I'll never not play third base.
Yeah. Through his interpreter, he's like, I'm not moving.
And it's like, cool.
I play
we
third
write
base.
the lineup.
Yeah. It's like, well, actually, Alex Cora makes the lineup, and you're making 300 and something million, so you'll play wherever you're told to play. That's ultimately the way it generally goes in pro sports. So, yeah, Devers, I guess, is cool with that. We're waiting for Aaron Rodgers, and I couldn't tell if this was a real report or not because someone spotted him on a beach somewhere. I guess there was a picture of him, like, gazing into the ocean and, you know, being all philosophical, and everyone's wondering, like, is he really thinking about where he's going to play next year? And it's as if he's holding up the whole process, which is exactly what he wants to do. Like, he knows if he's going to play or not, and he just has to make a choice on whether or not it's going to be in Pittsburgh. Sounds like Minnesota's still kicking tires, maybe the Giants. But we're all waiting for Aaron Rodgers, and I think that's exactly how he wants it. He wants the whole world waiting for him.
Where would you like him to go?
Not New York Giants. That's my team. We do not want him there.
Who do you want?
Who are the Giants,
anybody.
though, to say no to Aaron Rodgers? Like, with all due respect, Strud.
Who is the kid?
Who do the Giants think they are?
Tommy DeVito?
Yeah, I think they re-signed
Tommy
him.
DeVito. Tommy Cutlets, they like to call him. No, this is my thought process. The Giants aren't very good. So you bring in someone like Aaron Rodgers, who was a great quarterback, but still has a big personality. It just promotes dysfunction amongst that franchise. Just bring anyone in. Anyone you want to bring in, just to hold it till you figure out who your quarterback is through the draft. I'm hoping we get Eli Manning's nephew, Archie, next year. I think it's next year. So I hope we lose every game. Go out and lose. Actively lose.
I appreciate that greatly. I think he can declare after this season, I believe. I think it was I don't think he redshirted. I think he was like a pure freshman, and then he was a sophomore last year, and I think after his junior year he can come out. That is a guy worthy of tanking, and people will be tanking. Like, they will be trying to go 0-17 for Arch Manning just because of the name, the way he looks, the way he plays. If he wins a Heisman and he drags Texas to like a national championship game, it'll be absurd, the hype around him in that draft. But I understand what you're saying, and that is accurate. My point is, like, the idea that the Giants, are too good for Aaron Rodgers or something is also outlandish. They're too bad. They probably are. So I guess the answer would probably be Pittsburgh. The most compelling story is he goes to Minnesota and he's back in the NFC North.
Well, and
that's the most compelling story. And they're the best team.
They're a Super Bowl contender.
They're a very good team.
What about JJ? Isn't he there? JJ McCarthy?
JJ McCarthy. But what are you getting out of him? Like, he was a good college player, but like he blew out his knee or whatever it was in camp last year. He hasn't played a game in the NFL.
No, I agree. But
so, that's a dicey one if you're the Vikings. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, at least you're not like the Cowboys, who paid that much for Dak Prescott, and then Josh Allen's making $5 million less a year. Like, thank God I'm not a Cowboys fan. That would be
got a great coach. They hired a great coach, right?
Well, let's play this Josh Allen interview. I don't recall who he was doing the interview with. Dude, you look that up. Because I'll reference it. I want to make sure that I give it credit. But here's Josh Allen being asked that question. He just renegotiated his deal. He's going to make $55 million this year. Dak makes $60, and he was asked the question, like, why didn't you make more than Dak Prescott? They renegotiated your deal. You clearly could have demanded that, and the Bills would have given it to you. Here's how Josh Allen responded.
It didn't seem like, to my perspective, I was taking a whole lot less. But when the way that I make sense of it, when you start getting these fairly big numbers throughout the entire league, it's weird to say this, but what's 5 more going to do for my life that I can't already do right now, right? So, like, it's not that crazy to me, right? Like, I live a pretty good life. Got a house, got a car, we're good. But I wasn't looking to absolutely kill them at every chance that I could, and I told my agent that. I was like, hey, if this has any impact on the pack, or impact on the cap, I should say, let's figure out a way to not do that.
So that was a Zoom call with the media. I couldn't love this guy more.
That is a masterclass.
I could not.
How to say.
Like, it is
Fans love it.
so easy to play that card. And like, there's two guys in Toronto right now going through it that can't get that through their heads. And I'm astonished by it. And I get the responses. Well, it's not your money and all that. I get it. But Josh Allen in a cap world, and it is different when it's a salary cap. Because there's a finite number of how much money you can use. It's a little bit different with Vladdy in baseball because he'd say, well, you could spend $300 million, $350, $375. You don't need to have a strict budget, and he'd be correct in that. But everything Josh Allen said is accurate, and it plays so well, and it plays even better in a blue-collar town like Buffalo where he already owns everything. Like they're going to rename – that's a guy rename schools and streets and all that. And if he punches a ticket on a Super Bowl, which I still believe he's going to do at some point, they're going to play that. Like, that'll just be played on a loop at schools in Buffalo and in Western New York for the rest of time.
Well, and it's not like he took $20 million. He took, what is it, 55?
$55 million.
55.
But it's like you frame it in a certain way, and it's like, yeah, well, great guy. You know what I mean?
What a guy.
Such great PR.
It's just so charitable. Brilliant
but
PR.
no matter what,
Brilliant.
You're not a Cowboys fan sitting with a $60 million quarterback who's probably a $30 million quarterback, right? Like
isn't that the amazing thing?
That's the takeaway.
That somehow this is basically throwing a dagger at Dak and the
Straight
Cowboys. Yeah, because I believe the direct question was, and I might be paraphrasing.
You're better than Dak.
Can you believe that Dak is making 60 and you're not making the same amount? And it is
better off having Doug Flutie.
Yeah, it's staggering. It
Doug
really
Flutie
is.
instead of Dak.
It's staggering. Here's Pierre LeBrun, our TSN hockey insider. Pierre, does it not disgust you that Josh Allen makes less money than Dak Prescott?
It doesn't. I'll say this: when Dak restructured his deal last week to give the Cowboys more than $30 million in cap room to play with this year, that did give me some relief. I will say that.
Okay,
that was pretty good of Prescott to have done that. And I will also say that Prescott's a great quarterback. He's not Josh Allen, that's for sure, but he's a great quarterback. And Struddy, it sounds like you're a Giants fan. Am I right?
Struddy is a Giant fan. Yes, he is.
So is Dak Prescott? I believe he's 13-1 in his career against the Giants. That has nothing to do with your. That has nothing to. Okay,
we lost Struddy. He's going quiet. You actually finally got Struddy to stop talking.
Well,
we got to reset his whole thing.
Dak has absolutely owned the Giants. Destroyed them.
That is true, Struddy.
I think we're getting some biased commentating here. And the reality is, all of these salaries, the NFL is so weird. Like, I don't cover it for a living, so I don't totally understand the in and outs of the CBA. But like, I don't even understand what it means when like what Prescott just did. He restructured so that the Cowboys have more than $30 million to play with this year on the cap.
I know.
How does it all work?
It's incredibly confusing because Allen did the same thing. Make no mistake. Like it's pushing guarantees around and down the line.
Right.
It's incredibly confusing. I like half the time I feel like they're just making it up. They're like, well, we're just going to move some money around. Like what money and where is that going? And
but listen, Struddy has a point. Dak Prescott is no Tommy DeVito.
He's no Tommy DeVito.
Well, I want Tommy to be our quarterback this year, so we get Archie Manning. Not Arch. Yeah, Archie
Well,
Manning.
listen, the Cowboys will help you out by once again going 2-0 against the Giants. So we'll at least do that.
Okay.
We finally agree.
Look at you guys coming together here. We've got a bond between
brokering
Cowboy
deals.
And Giant fans.
Did they get a running back, Pierre?
Well, they signed Javonte Williams, who's had a lot of injuries. I think he'll be their number 2. And I do, they're going to draft a running back in the draft is what everyone who covers the team seems to think. We shall see.
Okay. All right. We got a big one here in Toronto tonight, Pierre. I'm sure you're aware of this. How do you, because this is the biggest regular season game I can think of, certainly this year.
For sure.
And there's been other examples in the past, but not with the same, with the same status on the line.
The division was never on the line.
The division has never been on the line. They've played Tampa, where they're going to play them in the playoffs, or Boston, where they're going to play them in the playoffs. But there's never actually been multiple stories on the line here where it's not only how do you match up against this team, but if you beat them and you beat them in regulation, you're going to surpass them in the standings. I don't think you can hype this enough. The question is, will the Leafs meet the moment, Or do you think the emotions could get to them? Could they try to go over the top and be a little bit jittery tonight? What are you expecting from them?
No, I don't think they'll be jittery. I worry more that they're coming off the long road trip, and sometimes teams are asleep, and the Leafs are asleep early on in those games. Not to mention that they're playing the quietest arena in the NHL on days not named Saturdays. But this game is so big. I went to the morning skate this morning. That's how big this game
Wow.
is. I mean, I had to go down and get a feel for this. No, I think the Leafs will meet the moment tonight. And, I know MJ's been big on this, and you guys have too on the show, but, the carrot to win the Atlantic and avoid each other between Tampa, Florida, and Toronto is so big. I will say with the caveat of this, I mean, if the Leafs win the division, there's a real chance they could play Ottawa, and for whatever reason, the Senators have had a lot of success against Toronto, so, of late. So it's not like it's a guaranteed first-round win for the Leafs either in the Battle of Ontario, but I do think you want to avoid Florida and Tampa at all costs if you're Toronto. And, this is an interesting time for the Panthers, too, because, the suspension to Ekblad, kind of it throws a wrench into their plans of wanting to get a look at how their top four looks with Ekblad and Jones on the right side. So they won't get Ekblad back till the second game of the playoffs, and that's not nothing because I think they really wanted to get a good chunk of the season at the end here together and look at that top four, and they won't be able to do that now.
Pierre, looking a little bit ahead, and I know they recognize that Tkachuk's out and Marchand, but let's assume these guys meet and they're all healthy at some point, maybe in the playoffs. Do the Maple Leafs have the ability to rise up and take on some of that gamesmanship that we'll see from Florida?
So, here's the interesting science experiment that the Leafs have been here the last 12 to 18 months. Under Brad Treliving, and that includes the hiring, obviously, of Craig Berube, the Leafs have not so subtly tried to transform themselves into a team that can better handle, the heaviness of a playoff game. But hopefully for them, not at the expense of scoring enough. And it's not easy to do, but of course the template is Florida themselves. So you guys have talked about this, I think. But, the Florida Panthers made a coaching change after winning the President's Trophy and leading the league in goals. It's like unheard of a couple of years ago. And the reason they did it is that Bill Zito wanted Paul Maurice to come in and transform their team into to play a style that is more successful come playoff time. And the rest, as they say, is history. But that's what the Leafs are trying to do under Brad Treliving. Very similar philosophy. And Chris Tanev was a magnificent addition that way last offseason. I love the Brandon Carlo trade. They are better suited, I think, to wade through those waters come playoff time. But they're not scoring organically like they have. And I guess what I'm saying is I won't know until we see it, and none of us will, but have they struck the balance or have they gone too far one way? I don't know.
Well, with the Panthers in town tonight, there was some thought that Chris Tanev would be a game-time decision. He has been activated by the Maple Leafs, Jonas, so that would suggest he's playing. He's playing tonight. Go ahead.
So I was curious, Pierre. Obviously, you mentioned the playoffs and scoring. Obviously, one key component in that is going to be Mitch Marner. So I wondered, with everything that went down in the last few days, do you think there was any healing that has to be done between him and the front office, or is it just now water under the bridge, do you think?
I'm really surprised that I'm being asked about this on OverDrive. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not surprised.
Couldn't think of anything else, Pierre.
I'm not surprised. So let me, knowing this would come up, I was collecting my thoughts and I've talked to a lot of people. I think the first thing to start with is to understand that from what I've gathered, when Brad Treliving and the Leafs front office approached Mitch and his camp about this whole Carolina scenario, let's stress this again. The first words out of their mouth was, "We want to sign you." But because there has not been a meaningful negotiation this year, it was presented to him as, well, we haven't negotiated this year. Is this an option that would interest you? I.e., the trade to Carolina and getting Rantanen back, and the Leafs would have signed Rantanen, and so on and so on. And obviously the answer was no, which is absolutely in Mitch Marner's right. I love when players use their no move because that's why you negotiate for them. That's part of your contract. But I don't think anyone, I don't know why it's upset some people that the Leafs did this. I'd be more upset if I were a Leafs fan that Brad Treliving didn't look at all his options when he's managing his assets. The guy that, they had not been able to negotiate an extension. So you're getting to the trade deadline and you got to look at everything. And here's proof of why other teams have done the same. Boston a couple of years ago, David Pasternak and his agent JP Barry were legitimately concerned that if they didn't sign an extension, they ended up signing a really good deal, but if they didn't sign by the trade deadline, that he could be traded. And Boston was in first place at the time. But I remember at the time talking to everyone involved, and there was a legitimate threat, and who knows, it could have been a bluff, but there was a lot of tension around that negotiation that if Pasternak wasn't signed, and he signed just before the trade deadline, that maybe they would look at what the market was for him. Fast forward to this year. If I would have told you in September that the Colorado Avalanche, who were trying to win a cup this year, would have traded Mikko Rantanen in January, you guys would have thought I was on crack. Mm-hmm. But this is what happens with players of this magnitude when teams feel threatened that they don't control the asset past the trade deadline.
But there's one key distinction there, Pierre, is the no movement clause.
Correct.
Rantanen did not have full control.
And neither did David Pasternak have
right.
the full one. Yeah, he had to modify it. Yeah, that is a key distinction. And so this goes back, and we have these discussions, Brian, on this show. The day July 1st, 2023 came, which is just a few weeks after Brad Treliving took over from Kyle Dubas, was a major day in this whole story.
Yep.
And it's not like we just realized it now. We talked about it at the time. When his no move went to 100% and Mitch Marner stayed put, the leverage changed that very day.
Yeah, and it was horrible negotiating, but there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, that happened, and the deal was brokered. And you're right, Mitch he's got the keys to the car, but it still doesn't answer whether or not Marner really wants to stick around, whether or not the Leafs' minds, can they change? It sounds as if, to your point, and you're reporting, they want to sign him. Does that mean what happens the rest of the year is completely irrelevant, and they're just going to try to sign him up until, midnight, June 30th or whatever it is? Or now do the Leafs have to reset and possibly put some pressure on Marner that, let's say he wants to stay, maybe they don't want to keep him? Is that option even available anymore? Is it just 100% Marner has to make the decision, and if he wants to stay, then that option will be there for him?
Well, first of all, what happens the rest of the year is definitely not irrelevant. I think what happens in the playoffs might be 90% of what happens on this file. Mitch Marner being the scapegoat for another first-round exit, if he doesn't put up numbers, could greatly affect the outcome of this thing. Mitch Marner leading the Toronto Maple Leafs into the conference finals could greatly affect how this ends up. The playoffs are everything to me in terms of where this goes. So there's that. Here's the other thing that I've been saying all week about this, just from a human being perspective. If I'm Mitch Marner, there are two ways you could react to what transpired, even though, again, I believe the Leafs were very diplomatic in how they approached it. You either lose trust in the organization because you feel slightly betrayed that they thought about trading you, or it scared the living crap out of you that could actually be a thing, that you could no longer be a Leaf. And it made you wake up the next day and say, you know what, I don't want to leave. So it could be one or the other, which are extreme opposite reactions, by the way. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that there's much in the middle. It has to be one or the other in my mind.
Pierre, when you look at the work that Craig Berube's done so far this year, what would you like to see him get done, or what do you think his maybe agenda is these last 20-some odd games?
For me, the number one thing for me is having Morgan Rielly get to where he needs to be in his game and find comfort with Brandon Carlo. That would be, if I'm Craig Berube, that would be the number one item on my wish list. Is feeling good about that tandem heading into the playoffs. And I think they will feel good about it, but you have to see it. And so the last bit of the regular season here, Strudwick, is really important for me on that, because you know what you have with Tanev. And so if you can get that high-profile pairing in a place where the trust is through the roof entering the playoffs, I think that's the game changer.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of that is like how much Berube can control there. You know, you're going to play him with Carlo. He's played with a lot of different defensemen over the course of the year. At some point, it's just on Morgan Rielly to do it. He's just got to play better. He's got to defend better in particular, or you got to pick a lane. If you're going to defend the way you're defending, you better get up in the play. You better create offense. You better make the opponent feel uncomfortable at times when you're on the ice. And I just feel like he's in this, and maybe that's how Berube can't approach it. Maybe he can go to him and clarify, this is which way you got to go here. I mean, he's probably been doing that. But, you know, it's not like you're talking about a rookie defenseman or, in Carlo's case, a guy who just got here and you can kind of bake in some uncomfortable scenarios that you know are coming. I mean, Riley's the longest standing Leaf, and we're still having these conversations.
But I think the one wild card in it is now you've thrown a new partner into the mix. Now you have 18 games to like suddenly figure out how to play together, right?
Yeah. And again, it's on him, I guess, to do it, though, right? Like, and I guess how you use them and like the zone starts and who they're going up against. But if you're a second pair,
they're playing hard competition.
You're going to play really good players, and you're going to play a lot of minutes, and there's going to be uncomfortable times.
And the other thing that's probably obvious is I wonder if, you know, Craig Berube has tipped his hand a bit tonight that Stolarz is getting the start against Florida. I mean, listen, he's playing his old team, so that's probably a big part of it. And he's been lights out when healthy this year. So I think most people that you would ask would probably think Stolarz is the game one starter come playoff time. But I do think like this is one of the biggest games of the year, and he gets to start. So that's the other thought that, you know, was crossing my mind this morning out of this game.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, in terms of the Canadian teams on the border of making it in, Ottawa's in a pretty good spot, right? They got a big game tonight, Boston in town. And the Habs, they picked up a point last night, this kind of Western road trip. They're picking up points, and they're staying.
Although that stung.
That one stung because they were up 4-2, and they had it.
Yeah.
Although they were down 2-0 also, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like it was 2-0, then 4-2, but they blew it in the third against the Seattle team.
They were lucky to get a point. I stayed up and watched that game, and they were thoroughly outplayed for a lot of it and managed to get timely scoring, including Slafkovsky's second goal where the stick goes over his head, and they somehow he didn't even celebrate because he thought he would get waved back, and somehow
right.
they called it a goal. But they still got a point. And say what you want, but the Habs, whether it's winning ugly or not, they've been a plucky bunch in the second half of the season, and they're still in the race. But they were lucky to get a point last night.
Yeah.
Well, how about that overtime goal, Pierre? Like that's a tough learning lesson for Hudson there, right? Like you're looking around, and you know, in that situation, you kind of got to look at the center, the winger. Is someone talking here? Is there something going on? And he had no idea. Montour blasted right by him, and that's D-men on D-men. That's not forward on D-men, right? So that's a tough one. You could see his reaction, hammered his stick into the wall.
5 seconds.
5 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, how often do you see off the draw 3 guys lining up like that, though, Strud?
No, and I don't like that lineup. But as a D, you know, it's a D on D, and you got to think, hey, what's up here? Like,
yes.
Is something possible here? But that's just youth, and I love Hudson. I love the way he plays, but unfortunately, sometimes you learn lessons like that that are really hard to see. They're on SportsCenter every 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm. And he was amazing again last night. Otherwise,
he's
my
great.
gosh, what a year he's having trying to win the Calder Trophy. But yeah, that was a crazy way to end an overtime game. Craig Button, who's doing color on our TSN Habs broadcast, nailed it after he goes, whoever did the pre-step for Seattle backs off, because that was totally pre-planned. And by the way, Brandon Montour finished the year in that 2-game set with the Habs with 5 goals in 2 games against Montreal. How about that?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Jeez.
And you look at it like he's leaning. Like there's a still shot that was circulating online. Like before the puck drops, he's kind of already cheating a little bit. And if you're not cheating, you're not trying. But usually in overtime, you see the 2 forwards line up and the defensemen both kind of concede. We're back here. Like you do your thing, I'll do my thing. Let's try to win the draw and slow play it. And I'd have to go back and look at it. I wonder if it was Montour that lined up first, and then Hudson was like, all right, I'll line up with you. See you later. See you later. And showtime for Montour. But still a big point.
To answer your question, I feel bad, Brian. I interrupted you about the Canadian teams. I think I looked at the Habs schedule this week. They got a pretty tough schedule, you know, especially the rest of March. Anyway, a lot of road games still. And so I think they'll continue to have to show people wrong if they stay in it. But they've already won their season anyway. Not that Habs fans want to hear this, but the Habs wanted to play real games in March, and that's what they're doing. But I really like where Ottawa's at, and I think the Rangers will join Ottawa as the 2 wildcards.
Yeah,
that would be my pick right now.
Well, then last night, 3-point game, Vancouver, Calgary, and one of those 2 teams with St. Louis, Utah won last night. Like it's you look at the odds, it's like 20.
Watch out for Utah.
Yeah,
watch out for Utah. They're finally healthy. You know, both the Leafs and the Habs were through there recently. They're playing some big time hockey, man. I mean, that game was close last night against Anaheim, but they tilted the ice actually most of that night. I was watching a lot of that game, and they have depth. Their blue line is healthy, getting goaltending. That place is jumping. It wouldn't shock me if Utah slipped in.
I could see that too. They were good against the Leafs the other night. Like not in the first, but second and third period and in overtime. They outplayed them. All right, Pierre, we'll leave it there. Enjoy the games tonight.
Go Cowboys.
Go Cowboys.
Well, even though I felt attacked coming on air, that Prescott, I leave in peace. Peace out.
Peace out. There's Pierre LeBrun, our TSN Hockey Insider. I don't know who I'm kidding to. I'm a Packer fan. Jordan Love's making like $53 million. He didn't really pull his weight this year at that kind of price. You know, if you compare and contrast, he should be making way less than Josh Allen. He does, but again, if Josh Allen is the bar, and it's like, well, if Allen's making 55, then Jordan Love should be making 30 million. You know, like he's just not in the same ballpark as Allen. You hope he gets close to it. I don't think he'll ever reach that level, but he's making a lot of money. A lot of money.
He should have taken 47 or 45.
He should have. He should have thought of the people of Green Bay and guys like me. Why doesn't he think of guys like me? Yeah, exactly. All right. Leafs Panthers tonight. Jonas, you're heading down there to cover the game. Good luck with that. Thank you for doing this as always. Struddy, you'll stick around. Dustin Nielson coming up.
I'll grind.
On the Oilers. We're grinders. We're going all the way to 7 before the game tonight. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, best bets coming up. Leafs Panthers tonight. The Oilers are on the East Coast. 5 p.m. start out there, eh? Strud, I mean, that's I must challenge some people in Edmonton trying to get home in time to see the game tonight with them in Jersey, but that's the way it goes when you're on the East Coast. Nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, the time change makes it tough, and it's snowing here in Edmonton.
You're kidding me. It's snowing there right now?
Yeah, it's snowing. Well, it's good for my lawn, right? I always see the bright side. I planted a bunch of flowers last year. They can look great. Okay. I'll send you a picture in May or June.
Please do. But this is a big one, man. Like they started this trip in Buffalo. It didn't go well for them. They have been losing a lot of games recently, losing ground on Vegas, and you got LA right behind you, you know, in terms of the Pacific and that 2-3 seed. And Ekholm not on the trip. There's a lot going on with these Oilers. And generally speaking, I'm rooting for them. You know that, Strud. I'm rooting for the Oilers.
You don't mean that.
I do mean that. I do mean that.
And that's okay. That's okay. I don't feel it's genuine. But what I see about this team is you got to keep in mind the player they traded for, Frederick, isn't ready to go.
Not even playing yet. Yeah.
Ekholm not on the trip.
Yep.
Walman has looked really good, right? And there's a good Ontario guy, right?
Love Jake Walman. Always have.
Really good. Really good. And a sneaky pickup. I'm not sure he was on anyone's radar prior to the trade deadline that I was aware of.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Maybe Dustin Nielson can tell us about that. Maybe Maybe he knew that it was coming. He is, of course, the president of Edmonton Sports Talk, host of the Nielson Show. You hear him on TSN calling CFL games all the time. Here's Dustin Nielson. Did you sniff that one out, Dustin? You knew that Jake Walman was on the radar for the Oilers, or what?
Oh, I just like how Struddy's already laid out excuses for the loss tonight. Eh? Like, it's already guys missing. Like, it makes sense. It makes sense. I don't want to have to talk about it for 3 hours tomorrow. But, you know, Walman, I mean, for what we've seen from Walman so far, I like him. I mean, it's not tough to upgrade some of the guys that they're rolling in there. So he's looked good so far. I mean, he looked insanely physical in the first game, and I don't know if that's because he actually is or because the Oilers just haven't played physical so far this year. But, I mean, early returns on the deadline, not so bad just yet.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned Frederick. Like, as Struddy points out, Frederick hasn't played yet. So I'm curious, like, in terms of the roster that you would expect to see come game one, like, how much of it is solidified? How much of it is still up in the air in terms of how, you know, all these different roles could shake out?
According to our show this morning, nothing's locked in just yet. So people are like, we're trying to figure out who's going to play with Leon Draisaitl in this city, right? And as of this morning, I had people suggesting Trent Frederick, who's never played a game for this team, could possibly play on the wing with Leon Draisaitl. So, I mean, the bottom line is Frederick's going to come in and provide something that they don't have, or at least they haven't seen yet this season, which would be some physicality. Can play center, could move him over on the wing. And, I mean, Jeff Skinner's getting to play the wing tonight with Leon Draisaitl. And if he scores, he might be scratched next game. Like, he's had a hard time staying in the lineup. So we'll see what happens on that front. But, I mean, and Nuge and Hyman have been locked in with McDavid. It hasn't worked as well as it has in other years. So as somebody pointed out today on one of our shows, if you don't know what your lineup is 65 games into the season, you might want to start getting a little bit concerned. I don't know if they should be there just yet, but I'm also not sure what the answer is to that lineup question.
Yeah, so Dusty, Jeff Skinner gets the chance to play with Draisaitl, but it seems like no matter what he does, he is like the ugly step kid who's just pushed out all the time, right? He's 11 goals, 12 goals. He's had some good moments. He's had some tough moments, but I think he's gone better. So what is it about his game that has drawn this bad love from the coaching staff?
I mean, I think it's a start to a season that he just sort of hasn't won them over from, because since January 1st, he's like +5, +6. And I know a lot of people point to his plus-minus. He was not good to start the season. Like, he was not playing good two-way hockey to start the season. I still don't know if I'd describe him as a good two-way player right now either. But the bottom line is, since January 5th, he scored 5 goals. He's a plus player. The other guys in their bottom 6 have, like, as a group, combined for 5 or 6 goals. So it's interesting with him getting a look at Draisaitl tonight, because we were trying to talk about this morning. They started the season, game 1, with Arvidsson and Skinner alongside Draisaitl. By the third period of game 1, Draisaitl was with Connor McDavid, and I don't know how much they've gone back to these two guys since. And these two guys were brought in to be top 6 wingers. Arvidsson has done it sparingly. Skinner really hasn't got a consistent chance at all. And I'm still wondering if maybe the plan at the beginning of the year could somehow come into focus maybe by playoff time, because in limited offensive opportunity, Skinner's actually produced a little bit. We'll see where it goes from here, though.
We're chatting with Dustin Nielson. The Oilers are on the East Coast playing the Devils tonight. And when Knoblauch, came in last year, Kris Knoblauch, the noise, we talked about it extensively. Like, all right, you're bringing in his junior coach, like McDavid's junior coach. Jeff Jackson knows him and liked him when he was a coach back in junior in Erie. What is this guy? What is he going to bring to the NHL? And there was some skepticism on our show anyway of exactly what would happen. And the guy, every button he pushed was the right button. Like, it was incredible the way he triggered that second half in Edmonton. We know what happened come playoff time. I'm curious what you've seen out of Knoblauch this year now that he's settled in. Is he showing different gears? Is he showing a different style? Any difference in terms of his disposition before the game, after the game? Because by this time last year, the Oilers were the hottest team in the league, and they're nowhere close to it this year. What gives you hope or belief that Knoblauch, will be able to push the right buttons this time to get them back into a cup final?
I will say the disposition has not changed.
Okay. He's
as straight as a line after every game. Like, you don't see much frustration, you don't see much excitement. And they got on a great run last year, and from mid to late November to mid to late January, they had the best record in the league this year. It's just the rest of the season they played like a non-playoff team. So this is one of the hardest teams. I've been doing this show for like 15 years. This is one of the hardest teams. Like, when they sucked, we knew they sucked. And when they've had good teams, we knew they had good teams. This team is confusing me quite a bit. And the thing with Knoblauch, who just surpassed Jay Woodcroft's 133 games coached. So he's accomplished something that Woodcroft didn't accomplish, and that's getting to like 135 games as head coach of this team. But Struddy can probably chime in on this one as well, is that I feel like he's fallen back into the same sort of pattern that a lot of other coaches had here. And that is, when things start to go bad, you automatically put McDavid and Draisaitl together and hope that it works. It hasn't worked as much this year as I think as it has in the past. And I say this morning, and I should watch your guys' show or some other shows more, like, coaches in Edmonton just blend lines all the time. Like, I know Winnipeg is rolling lines, like the same guys over and over and over again. Washington leaves a lot of those guys locked in. Struds, the Oilers just, I mean, it's a different set of line combinations almost every 2 or 3 games, which I didn't think Woodcroft would fall back into, but that's the same thing that happened with all the other coaches here.
Yeah, and I think that, your point's well made. I think the challenge for him is he's trying to find a spark, right? Like, when's the last time we thought, man, look at these two guys. There's a real spark there. And we saw a spark last year. We haven't seen it this year. And I think part of it, Dusty, and we watch all the games, watch a lot of games around the league. These guys aren't having any fun. Like, it does not. I know that they're paid, but they score. There's just nothing. There's no juice out there to their game.
Is that
drives,
the cup
that drives
hangover?
a few guys crazy here. Like, it's just,
yeah.
I mean, it's okay to be excited to score and to be excited after you win in overtime. And it's just, I think you make. What were you going to say there, Hazy? Like,
well, I was like, I've noticed that, like, in terms of the cup hangover is something that comes up every single year, and I remember talking about it in September. I'm like, it's a cup hangover without winning. So. What are they?
Kind.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of hangover, and it's understandable that they're miserable in September and maybe miserable in October, and it's a long season and you got to do it again. But I'm with you guys, like, having seen them even, and I get it off losses, but there's been multiple occasions where, like, shots have gone viral with Draisaitl losing his mind after a loss, and it was McDavid the other night in Buffalo. I think he broke a stick going off the ice or something like that, and. Like, those guys, they're showing their frustration constantly, but you guys are intimating that even when they're winning, it's almost as if they're not willing to fully engage. And I'm curious what is your theory on that? Is it because they feel like the regular season's irrelevant? Like, is that possible that they're going to get to the playoffs and just snap out of it?
I almost feel like they're annoyed.
Game, but yeah, it could be.
It's like they're annoyed. They're annoyed with the regular season. It's like, man, like, enough of these games. And that's a scary game to play because, they're going to be a playoff team. And we saw last year, when they faced some critical moments in the playoffs, they managed to come through. I know they didn't finish the comeback, but being down 3-0 and forcing the Game 7 in the Cup final, it's not easy to do. So they might just be waiting to flip a switch, but how many of these guys can actually do that? And that's where you could run into trouble, where it's like, wait a second. The switch didn't flip, and it's Game 7 against the Kings, and it better flip tonight, or else it's going to be a really disappointing season.
Absolutely. With Dustin Nielson. So where does the big guy come into play in all this? And that being McDavid, where he's still having a great season, but based on his standards, outside of his rookie year, this is probably the worst year he's had of his career. Guys, would you say that? I mean, in terms of he's been healthy for the most part, banged up here or there. He had the suspension. But he's not going to win the Hart. He's not going to be nominated for the Hart. He doesn't deserve to be, in my opinion. He's not going to be one of the 3 finalists for the Hart Trophy. He's not going to win the Art Ross. He's not going to win the Ted Lindsay. He's not going to win the Rocket. Like, this is the first time I can think of probably since his rookie year, where all of these are a reality. How is the market kind of handled the season that McDavid's had this year?
Well, I mean, Draisaitl's had such a good year that some Oilers still going to be involved in all those. So, but it's just, I mean, his wingers aren't producing. Nuge and Hyman are. I mean, Hyman scored 50-plus goals last year. He's going to maybe get 50 points this year. Nuge had 100 points 2 years ago. He might get 50 points this year. And McDavid, before the 4 Nations, we were sitting around going, man, something might be wrong with this guy. Like, wait, is he sick? Is he banged up? What's going on? And then that first game against Sweden at the 4 Nations, he was absolutely buzzing. You're like, he looks like he's in a different league than even the best players in the world. And then he's come back here, and he's been a minus player. He's barely above plus minus 0 this year. He's usually like a plus 20 guy. And then he had like the first 2 periods against Dallas on Saturday. He looked like Connor McDavid again. And then it's just something just seems slightly off this year for him and the connection with his wingers.
Yeah, and it's so true, and I can't put my finger on it, like, because that no one's really going at their best. Like, if we said which Oiler has had a great or lived above their expectations or played above, I think there's Leon, After that, maybe
Corey
Ty
Perry.
Anderson, but that's
Corey Perry.
Corey Perry. So we're talking about a top player, then two, no disrespect, kind of bottom of the lineup guys. And I think that's the challenge. So how do you get out of that? So is it, Hayes, to your point, is it the hangover? Is it, okay, we're going to wait for the playoffs to start? The problem is if you're not going by game 83, you could be out game 87.
Right. That happens quick, man. It happens quick. And that will be staggering because of where they were last year. And coming into this season, everyone was picking them to do what Florida did, right? Like go back to learn from your mistakes or learn from the, being shaken up in the Cup final and go back and do it. And like based on what you guys are saying and what I'm seeing from afar, I don't feel great about that happening. Like it seems like in the West, you got Winnipeg, Dallas, Vegas, Colorado, Edmonton. Like is Edmonton fifth? Like that's probably appropriate odds right now in terms of who's going to represent the West in the Cup final.
I think that's fair. I think that's probably where they fall right now. We were asking people on our show this morning, like, have you lost faith in the Oilers as a Cup contender? Like they're going to be a playoff team, and a lot of people said that they had. I view it right now that I think they could come out of the Pacific. Like even with their plan, I think they could flip a switch and navigate their way through Los Angeles and Vegas. But whoever comes out of that Central that's going to be a tough out. So they're going to have to work on that if they're going to take that next step back to where they were last year. And you know what it really does? It just makes me that much more impressed with what Florida did last year.
Oh,
like we've seen more teams go the way of the Oilers after losing the Cup final than go the way of the Florida Panthers and climb right back up there.
Absolutely. It's so tough to get back on the horse, man. It's so tough. And then you look at Tampa, they did it 3 years in a row with COVID in between. I mean, it was staggering what's happened, in the state of Florida in particular. Here's Dustin Nielson. You hear him and see him with the CFL on TSN, president of Edmonton Sports Talk and host of the Nielson Show. Great catching up with you, Dustin. We appreciate you doing this, man. Enjoy the games tonight.
Yeah, thanks a lot, buddy.
You got it. There's Dustin Nielson. I don't know what's up with Strud. Strud's out in Edmonton. He's swimming right now. We'll come back with our best bets powered by FanDuel. Chris Tanev in the lineup tonight. He will pair up with Jake McCabe. That means Morgan Rielly going with Brandon Carlo. This could be about the lineup you can expect from the Leafs when it comes to Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is as big as it gets. Leafs Panthers tonight. You can watch it on TSN 4 tonight. We'll come back with our best bets. Tee up that game one more time. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, Al's brother hiding somewhere in the city with a pair of Leaf tickets. You have to guess where he's hiding for your chance to win them. This is the fourth clue of the week. This is a big clue. We ready with Al's brother? Let's get to this fourth clue of the week for Al's brother.
Hey, OverDrive fans, it's Thursday, and it's time for your final clue to find out where is Al's brother and get yourself a pair of Leafs and Avs tickets for March 19th. Here is that final clue. This establishment is home to hockey's holy grail and is known as the Museum of Hockey, but to some, it's known as a hall with some plaques in it.
What kind of an idiot would say that? That's so disrespectful to call it a hall with some plaques in it.
It's a hall with some plaques in there.
Excuse me. I'm trying to get a read in here.
Oh, no.
When you hear the cue to call tomorrow, the first caller through with the correct location wins a pair of Leaf tickets. Leafs Avalanche, March 19th. Find Al's brother brought to you by McAlpine Ford in Aurora, our family, the Ford family, and you. Context, Struddy. Don't allow that clip to distort what you think I was saying.
It's a hall with some plaques in there.
Playing it. It's not true. There was depth to that commentary.
The context.
Context, very important. I love the Hall of Fame. Always have. People always know that. Always been a big supporter. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I am going big game hunting here, Strud. Scott Lawton is paying plus 700 anytime goal scorer tonight. It's his first game as a Maple Leaf at Scotiabank Arena. He grew up down the road in Oakville. He went to games as a kid. He grew up a Leaf fan. It's going to be, I think, a very emotional night for him. I'm going to parlay that with Austin Matthews 4+ shots on goal, Carter Verhaeghe 4+ shots as well. Verhaeghe's a local guy, loves playing the Leafs, was in the Leaf system at one point. They dumped him for, who did they trade him for? It was something ridiculous with the Islanders. Lou Lamoriello. It was like a 5-player deal. It was awful. Anyway, that parlay, Lawton anytime, Matthews 4+ shots, Carter Verhaeghe 4+ shots, paying plus 4,369. Plus 4,369. That's a payout. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Live same-game parlays are now available for every NHL game on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly, 18+, physically located in Ontario. I feel good about the Leafs tonight. Michael Grabner, that's who he was. They acquired Michael Grabner, and Carter Verhaeghe was a part of that trade. That one hurts in retrospect. How are we feeling about your Oilers tonight? You think they get a win in New Jersey or what?
Oh, man. You know what? I want to be able to say that they're trending in the right direction. I thought they maybe were after they went through Tampa and Florida and Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
But then they come back and have a good couple of periods against Dallas, and they lose against Buffalo. So I can't say they're trending in the right direction. I think that's what you want to see. Just even when you're losing, if you're just getting back on track, then the wins will come.
Yep.
So maybe tonight they start that against a bit of a depleted team there in New Jersey.
Absolutely. They're wounded down in Jersey for sure. So big one for Edmonton, big one for the Leafs tonight. Ottawa's in action tonight. Tampa's in action. It's going to be a great night in the NHL. Big games in the NBA tonight, and the players continuing as well. A bunch of Canadians sitting there looking good. Hadwin played well today. Pendrith, Corey Connors, all in the red. So that's a good sign for the Canadians down at the players as well. All right, Strud, good seeing you, pal. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Anytime, guys.
Always.
Talk to you soon.
Appreciate you grinding it out until 7, unlike our friend Jonas. Yeah, Jonas he's a diva, right? He's a diva.
He loves warm up.
He loves warm up. Loves warm up. Has to be there for it. All right. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m. We'll chat then.